everybody. Happy Monday. I do not know why there's this I don't know. It kind of looks like I have a halo over me. Maybe there's some angelic stuff going on today, which is good because it's right on time for today's topic. Welcome, everybody. If this is your first time on the Janelle Villiers podcast, I am so excited to have you on. My name is Janelle Villiers. I am your host, and this podcast is all about helping people with tips and different how-tos for when it comes to writing your book, particularly those who are self-publishing. I have a lot of tips, a lot of things to help you do that. Also, I bring on guests who are already authors, and I love to hear the stories of authors of how they wrote their book. And so that way we can just share with each other about things that are helpful. So that way you can help, that helps you get your story out there. And then sometimes I bring on guests that haven't published yet, but their story is super worth sharing. So welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the YouTube channel. If this is your first time, go ahead and put a 1 in the comments so I can shout you out. If this is not your first time, if you're returning, go ahead and put a 2 in the comments so I can shout you out. And if there are any questions that you have, put those in the comments as well. I see the comments, I see the questions, and I can answer them in real time. So I'm really excited because today we're talking about something that I realized is actually an issue for a lot of people. I've been having some conversations with some of my clients around this, in some networking groups as well. And the topic is, how do you write about people who are still alive? Right? And especially for my friends who are writing more memoir books, I feel like this comes up more for them. Sometimes I have people who are writing how-to books, and when they're writing the how-to books, a topic will come up that they want to share a particular story to help illustrate how to do something or how to not do something. And in the process of telling the story, they're revealing a lot about themselves. You're revealing a lot about what's going on for you in your life and things that have happened. And sometimes that involves talking about experiences that involve people who are still alive. And you're curious, how do I tell this story? For some people, I've even heard people say, actually, I'm not going to write this story because so-and-so is still alive. And so I can't write this story yet. And so I just want to share with you guys, number one, you don't have to wait for people to die to share the story. But I get it. People are concerned. I know even legally, some people are wondering about being sued and all sorts of things. So I really wanted to get into that today. So that way you guys can take this information to help you get started to write your book where you're sharing some of your life experiences that are going to help other people. And as you guys know, if you're not a first time here, you know that is my biggest thing. I know that your book is going to help other people. And the only way to do that is to share your experiences. So how can we do this in a way where, I know you're wondering, how can I do, is there a way to do this so that way people don't get offended, so that way people don't get mad at me, all of the things. So, and you know, I have my notes because I always have notes for you guys. I want to make sure I tell you everything. Number one, let's start with ownership, and not something that sounds like accusations or you pointing your fingers. So you're allowed to tell your story, but you are responsible for how you tell it. So it doesn't need to be this thing where this is what happened to me and this is what they did. It's not that. It's writing from a perspective of like, this is how I experienced it. This is what they did wrong and this is what they did. This is how I experienced it. And you don't necessarily need to use statements about certain people's motives or intents or even like diagnose them with something. Just anchor the story on the impact that it had on you, not judging the other people. It's a really great way. So for example, instead of saying something like, they ruined my life, you can instead say something like, at the time, I felt powerless and unsafe, and I didn't know how to protect myself. All right. Okay. Number one. That's number one. So if you found that helpful, go ahead and put an H in the comments so I know that you're finding this helpful. Again, if you have any questions, put those in the comments. I know that you guys are out there. Hello to all of you who are watching live. And if you're watching the recording, please put the questions in the recording. If you're watching the recording as well, I will come back to the questions and I will answer them. Number two, Vulnerability is about, it's really about insight, not necessarily like exposing people. So if you're thinking, okay, like I need to give like all of these details in order to like prove my point, you don't necessarily have to do that because more details don't necessarily equal truth per se. So, one of the things that you can do is you can ask yourself, what does the reader need to understand this lesson? What do they need to, excuse me, what do they need to know in order to understand the lesson? And if names aren't important, cut them out. If timelines, when things happen, cut them out. If locations or descriptions that don't serve to show your growth or how you grew, cut them out. For those of you, many of you who know, I wrote a book called I Slept with a Married Man. Am I Still a Good Person? And uh, people's names are not mentioned and locations are not really mentioned and timelines are certainly not mentioned because none of that helps with getting the lesson across. So you don't need to do that. The only reason why you need to do that is if you're trying to point fingers, right? And that's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to recognize how I was impacted by things. And so what's really important is that the emotional honesty is what matters more than the actual factual details that you're trying to give. Does that make sense? So if a detail satisfies curiosity but not clarity, just remove it. It's not necessary. Okay. Is that helpful? Again, put an H in the comments if this is helpful. If it's not helping you at all, then I get it. But don't worry, I got lots more tips. Okay, so the other thing that I would recommend is that you separate the healing from proving. This is again with like the details bit, but if you're still trying to prove you were right, you may not be ready to actually publish this particular chapter or this particular experience or story. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. It's true. If you're still in this like, I got to prove that I was right, because it's not about being right or wrong. It's about, again, sharing your experience and what you learned from this, right? And so if you write the story first without the intention of sharing it, that might be something that you can consider doing, right? So essentially, you can consider that and then revisit the chapter later or the story that you want to share later and ask if this is written from pain or is this written from perspective? And if it's written from pain, again, maybe you don't put it in. But if it's written from a place that's coming from like understanding perspective of growth and what you learned, et cetera, then maybe it's okay to keep it in. When you're writing, there can be that healing that comes. And a lot of times the healing comes before you actually write publishable writing. It's not necessarily the same thing. And I get it. Sometimes writing it out can create a sense of healing and it's therapeutic in that way. So please go ahead and do that. But when it's right before publishing, these are the types of things that you should be thinking. Did I write this part because it was coming from pain or if it was coming from perspective? Again, if it's coming from pain, then perhaps we don't include it, but it was very therapeutic and healing for you to actually write it out and talk about what happened for you during that particular story or experience. Again, if this is making sense for you, please put an H in the comments for help. This is helping, right? So a lot of people are afraid of getting sued by family members. I've like heard people even say that. And while that is really an extreme legal fear, I mean, that is very extreme. Most people aren't doing that. The real day-to-day fear, I would say, is actually just relational. Like people are nervous about having conversations with people who are like, oh, I don't like that. I won't like it if you put me in it. And so I really want to talk about both. Let's talk about how to handle that. So the first I would say, or this is point number 4, but expect avoided conversations. Let's just put that out there right now. There are going to be some conversations that maybe you avoided in the past that now, because you're writing this book, it actually opens the door. This is the thing that opens the door to have the conversation now. And so the way in which it opens the door is because you can prepare them for what is about to happen in this book, right? So you didn't have this conversation before, but hey, look, I'm writing this book and I really just want to let you know that you actually are in it. And I'm not here to judge you or say that you were right or you were wrong, but I am writing from my perspective and how this experience was for me. And then you just talk about it. Like, what was it really like for you? I'm curious, So the thing is that publishing truth often, it surfaces conversations that honestly, like you haven't really had. I know this definitely happened for me. I had conversations with family members um, because I knew they were in it. And I think that those conversations were actually really helpful, certainly really healing, because I don't know if we would have had those conversations had I not had this book that opened the door towards having these difficult conversations. And so I think it's really important that you decide in advance, am I willing to stand calmly in my truth if someone disagrees? Are you willing to stand calmly in your truth if someone disagrees? And then basically, it sounds like I understand that you experience that differently, and that's okay. I'm just going to be writing it though from my experience and the way that I went through it. And again, not pointing and saying that you were right or you were wrong or I was wrong and you were right, whatever. It's more just like I'm just going to be sharing and expressing how I experienced it and what I learned. But I understand if that's not necessarily how you experience it. Maybe for you it was something different. And maybe that ends up having you that maybe that leads to a conversation where maybe they're open to having you describe what it was like from their point of view. And maybe that'll also be helpful. You can learn what they learned from that experience as well. But I really want you to understand that, like, I'm giving you permission. You're not required to debate your lived experience. This is not that. You don't have if you find yourself having to debate and like say like, no, but this was how I felt. And they're like, that's not how you felt. Like, that's not the conversations we're looking to have. So really and truly, it's just about being calm in your experience and what you felt and what you learned from it. I think you have to also recognize that silence, distance, or discomfort even doesn't necessarily mean that you were wrong. It just means that for people, like this is bringing up things that maybe they didn't want to have to face or recognize, and that's okay. Like these are uncomfortable conversations, and I think having them, though, I think finally having them and trying to work towards them really does give a sense of clarity for you even as to what you learned, and maybe that other person isn't ready yet to face them, and so that creates the silence or distance or discomfort. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong. They're just going through their own issues, right? So discomfort is not the same thing as damage, right? There can be discomfort and you can still work through this. Again, if this is helpful for you, put an H in the comments. I really want to know. Okay. Something else that's helpful is tip number 5. Use the would I still say this filter. So definitely intent matters a lot more than reaction necessarily. But here's what I would say is like a practical tip is ask yourself, would I still write this if they never apologized? Would I still write this if they never apologized in current tense, or if they did apologize, would I still write this if they never apologized, past tense? Another question to ask yourself, would I still write this if no one validated me? Would you still write this if no one validated you? And finally, would I still write this if it only helped one reader? Would I still write this if it only helped one reader? If the answer is yes to these, then your story likely belongs on the page. So saying yes to these, definitely, I would strongly encourage you to continue writing the story and sharing that. Okay, point number 6, change identifiers strategically, and not just names. Protection is about recognizability, not secrecy. So we're not necessarily trying to make things secret, but we don't necessarily need to make certain people recognized either. So you can change multiple identifiers. You can change age of people, their profession, the order of the events in which it happened, the location, the language in which people speak, the culture from which they come from. And so just combine characteristics when appropriate. Like you can combine, flip, change them, whatever. But I would say really try to avoid one-to-one portrayable, one-to-one like direct, identifiable characteristics of certain people. If the lesson doesn't require it, then you don't need it. You really don't. So you're writing meaning, not transcripts. I think some people are like, oh, but I got to get like exactly what they said. You're writing for meaning, not court transcripts. All right. So it really is about the takeaway of the meaning of whatever experience happened or dialogue transpired. Okay. Tip number 7, don't diagnose, label, or assign what you think other people's motives are. Don't do that. This is one of the fastest ways authors get into trouble. So just, it's a big no-no, right? So some practical tips are: describe behaviors, not psychological conclusions. Just, this is what they did, this was their behavior, not like, oh, they must have bipolar disorder. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Avoid medical, legal, or moral labels. Don't do that. Oh, they're a bad person, they're an addict. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just describe their behavior. They did this. And if they did it more than once, they did it more than once, right? Let the reader draw the conclusions for themselves. And the conclusions that they should be drawing are from your description of how you experienced whatever was happening or taking place. So safer examples of language you could use is: I experienced, fill in the blank. It felt like, fill in the blank. I interpreted, fill in the blank. Or at the time, I believed, fill in the blank. Any of those would be way safer to use than, identifying or trying to diagnose people with something. All right. Tip number 8. We're getting down to the last couple of tips here. Tip number 8, shift the lens from what happened to who I became. Transformation isn't what makes the story ethical and valuable. So you really want to focus on your transformation. It doesn't matter the ethics, or that kind of a thing. It's your transformation. The transformation is the value, right? Because people want to know how you transformed, so that way they can possibly do the same thing, right? So some practical tips around this is: end scenes with reflection, not accusations. They did this, they did that, they were this, they were that. No, just end it with a reflection about yourself. Name the growth, the boundary, or maybe awareness that you gained, and show that the story changed your decisions going forward. It's a really easy way to do that. Instead of pointing at the other person, you're pointing at yourself. Remember, when you point your fingers at someone, there are 3 other fingers pointing back at you. It's a real thing, though. So the impact here is that this chapter or this story is helping someone heal. It's not to help you vent. That's not the point of this. That's not the point of you writing. Now, if initially it's you venting, great, but then you're going to then edit it so that way at the end there's some reflection, right? How did you recognize how you grew? You recognize what you learned. You recognize how you changed, how it changed certain decisions that you made moving forward, that type of a thing, right? So this chapter is to help you and someone else heal. It is not to vent. Okay, tip number 9. Include a disclaimer, but I would say don't hide behind it. The real point in the disclaimer is that it supports your integrity, but it doesn't replace it. So some tips, and then I'm going to actually give you guys one, is tip is use compassionate language. Don't be defensive. Definitely don't use legalese. That's not good. You want to reinforce that the story reflects your personal experience and your personal perspective. And then pair the disclaimer with responsible storytelling throughout the book. So you're going to continue to be that way throughout. So here's an example of a disclaimer you can use. I'm going to read it, but I will definitely post this in the comments if you guys find this helpful. Please, again, let me know if this is helpful. Put an H in the comments if this is helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. I really want to know. But here's a disclaimer that you can use. This is written to feel human and respectful, not defensive or legal or legally heavy, right? Okay. You put your name and you have the disclaimer. This book reflects my personal experiences, memories, and perceptions. The events and conversations described are shared from my point of view and are not intended to represent the complete perspective of any other individual involved. Names, identifying details, and circumstances have been changed where appropriate to protect privacy. This work is not written to accuse or assign blame, but to share my lived experience and the lessons drawn from it. I write this story with compassion for myself and for those who are part of it, believing that honesty, when shared responsibly, can lead to understanding, growth, and healing. Hmm? Not so bad, right? Okay, so again, I will put that disclaimer in the comments below. Hold on, let me do that right now. Okay, copy. I'm coming, guys. I'm coming. I'm gonna give it to you. All right, there it is. Okay, please feel free to use that. If you're on YouTube, you will see that on YouTube come up in the comments. If you are on Facebook or LinkedIn, I will go ahead and put it in the comments later, but I just can't put it in live. I think it only allows me to put it in live on YouTube. Sorry about that. But don't worry, I'll get it. Or message me. You guys know how to message me. Message me privately and let me know, hey, Janelle, I want the disclaimer that you gave. I'm going to put it in my book. I'd like to use it for my book. Go ahead. I want you guys to have it so you can use it. Again, if you're finding this helpful, please put an H in the comments so I know that this is helpful. This is valuable for you. You can put a V for value. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. I'm willing to answer them while I roll into tip number 10. Accept that ethical writing still carries risk. So there is no version of truth telling that guarantees universal comfort. So if you're trying to make sure that everybody's going to be comfortable, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. So some practical tips are: make peace with this, that growth often disrupts silence, and choose integrity over approval. Again, not everyone's going to be happy, but you're going to be sharing your growth and what you've learned and your experiences. And trust that readers who need your story will recognize your care in which you're telling it. So, as a wrap up, we talked about 10 different tips for how to write your story when people are still alive. Tip number 1 was start with ownership, not accusation. So this is how I experienced it. Number 2, vulnerability is about insight, not exposure. So what you're doing is thinking to yourself, what does the reader need to understand the lesson, and only include those things. Tip number 3, separate healing from proving. If you're still trying to prove that you were right, you may not be ready to share this story. Number 4 is expect that the conversations that you have been avoiding may come up, and prepare for them. So decide in advance, am I willing to stand calmly in my truth if someone disagrees? And remember, you are not required to debate your lived experience. And not everyone is going to be comfortable with your experience and what you've learned and how you've grown. And that's okay. Maybe they have to go through their own process. That's okay. Okay, number 5, use the would I still say this filter. So ask yourself, would I still write this if they never apologize? Would I still write this if no one validated me? Would I still write this if it only helped one reader? If the answer is yes, then the story likely belongs on the page. Tip number 6, change identifiers strategically. And I mean, not just the names. We're talking about multiple identifiers: age, profession, the order of events and when things happen, location, the culture in which people come from, maybe the language that people are speaking. And then you just recognize you don't need to make things exactly as they are. This is not, that doesn't like prove that you're being more honest or anything like that. Because again, this is about your experience, your growth, and what you've learned. You're writing meaning, not a court transcript. Tip number 7, don't diagnose, label, or assign motive. Please don't do that, really and truly. Describe behaviors, not psychological conclusions. Avoid medical, legal, or moral labels. Please do that. So safer language includes I experienced, it felt like, I interpreted, and at the time I believed. Tip number 8, shift the lens from what happened to this is who I became. So end scenes with reflection, not accusations. Name the growth, the boundary, or the awareness gained, or show how this particular experience or the story changed your decisions moving forward. Tip number 9, include a disclaimer, but don't hide behind it, right? So use compassionate language, reinforce that the story reflects personal experience and perspective, and then continue to be responsible in your storytelling throughout the book. If you want the disclaimer, go ahead and put disclaimer in the comments. So I know that you want the disclaimer. I will send it directly to you. If you're on YouTube, I put it in the comments. You can find it in the comments. If you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, go ahead and put disclaimer in the comments, and then I'll send you the disclaimer that you can put in your own book. And then finally, tip number 10, accept that ethical writing still carries risk. There is no version of truth telling that guarantees universal comfort. And so finding peace in that is what's probably the most important. Trust that the reader who needs your story will recognize the care with which you're telling it. So guys, really, I hope what you take away from this is that you may want to end with something, you may want to finish writing your book and make it that, oh, everybody feels good about this. Or you may feel like, oh, I need to, okay, cool. Beverly, you want the disclaimer. I can definitely get that to you. You may want to feel like, oh, I'll just wait until they die. But I'm just telling you, you don't have to. Because if you're going to wait for people to die, that means that you're also waiting to help other people with your story. And I don't think you need to do that. You can tell your story in a responsible way without having to necessarily ruin relationships. But I will say that writing your story is something that is truly transformative when you start sharing your experiences, your stories, and what you've learned from them. And you can do so in a responsible way that doesn't point fingers, that's not saying who's right and who's wrong, and tries to preserve those relationships. Like I said, in fact, you may find that it opens the door towards conversations to have healing and to have transformation between people, the people in your life, in a way that maybe you wouldn't have before. So please give this a thought. Definitely get the disclaimer, because I want you guys to have it so that way you feel the freedom to be able to continue to write, to share your story, to help the people that you know that your book is going to help. And so writing your story responsibly doesn't mean shrinking it. It means telling it with wisdom, boundaries, and courage. You're not writing to hurt. You really aren't. You're writing to heal. And healing sometimes begins when silence ends. That is what I've got for you guys today. Again, if you found this helpful, go ahead and put an H in the comments for yes, I found it helpful. If you found it valuable, you can put a V in the comments. If you have any questions at all, please put those in the comments. Even if you're watching the recording, I look at all the comments. I'm going to respond to them. If you want the disclaimer like Beverly did, please, if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, please put disclaimer, and I will send you the disclaimer directly to you. This is something that you can use to put in your book. So that way you can go ahead and tell your story with the freedom to know that you're on time. You're doing exactly what you need to do. All right. Take care, everyone. Happy holidays when they come. And I will see you next Monday. Same time, same place. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye.